Welcome into Texans today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and we have a great show on tap for you today. But a lot of today's show comes from a couple ESPN articles. And if you know anything about ESPN, a lot of their articles are put behind a paywall, $120 a year to be exact. This is why you hit that sub button, because I'm breaking down articles like that here on Texans Today for the low, low price of $0 a year. So if you want free Texans content, free content around your favorite team, and all the latest going on around the NFL, well, this is your one-stop shop. Go down and hit that sub button. We've got some ESPN power rankings after Super Bowl 60. Where did they put the Houston Texans? A little bit lower than a lot of y'all might like. And then also on the back half of today's show, they went through a lot of quarterback options for teams this offseason. Where does Davis Mills stack up? Because he's actually one of the top options in that article. I'll break down what ESPN had to say about Davis Mills. But before we get into the ESPN power rankings, I want to hear from you folks at home. Where do you think the Texans should rank? 1 to 32. 1, you think they're going to win the Super Bowl next year? 32, you think they're going to be the worst team in the NFL? Let me know where you would rank the Texans, because little tease right here. They were not in the top 10 for ESPN. If you're wondering, which teams did they have ahead of the Houston Texans, Jeremy? Well, here are ESPN's power rankings following Super Bowl 60. Obviously, the two Super Bowl teams they have at 1 and 2. It's the Seattle Seahawks, the New England Patriots. Then they're going with the Rams, Broncos, Bills, Niners, Lions, Eagles, Jags, Packers, all the way down until you reach the Houston Texans at unlucky number 13, behind the Kansas City Chiefs and the Chicago Bears, just ahead of the Baltimore Ravens and the LA Chargers. Now, do I think the Texans should be a little higher? I think they have a top defense in the entire National Football League, so I think that might be top 10 worthy, but according to ESPN, not so much. And ESPN reporter for the Houston Texans, DJ Bieniemy, had this to say, where they said 3 words basically for every team this offseason. His 3 words: improve within the margins. And this is what Bieniemy had to say. The Texans aren't operating with a lot of cap space, ranked 21st in 2026 per overthecap.com. So this year, more than ever, is about getting past those divisional round. They're 0-8 in those games, but at least they have draft capital to improve the roster with 4 picks in the top 69. Nice. The offensive line and running back positions will be key spots to focus on, along with adding to the safety room. Every move will help a 12-5 roster that can't get over the hump. Now, nothing groundbreaking in this article, nothing that, would shock Texans fans, but I do think it is a pretty powerful message from ESPN having the Texans outside of the top 10, right? They were in the divisional round for the 3rd straight year in a row. Yes, they didn't make it past the New England Patriots, but they lost to a Patriots team by not a lot, with their starting quarterback throwing 4 interceptions in the first half. And I do agree with DJ, right? You need to get offensive line, you need to get running back, you need to get safety. And per over the cap and per Spotrac, the Texans, pretty much bottom 10 in the NFL in salary cap. Now, I already did videos on the channel. You can go back and watch them on how the Texans can save some money by restructuring contracts, by cutting different players. But it still stands. The Texans need to add in the draft, and most namely offensive line. And I think that is where a lot of the people at ESPN and a lot of the NFL pundits around the league are probably doubting the Houston Texans. And for good reason. Let's look at the last 5 offensive line draft picks for your Houston Texans. Ariante Ursary, I think the best pick by far on this screen, your starting left tackle, replacing Laramie Tunsil. I think he did a good job as a rookie. Will look to improve in year 2, and I think, he's on a path to be a good tackle in this league. Blake Fisher, not so much. The 2nd-round pick out of Notre Dame has been more of the swing tackle and 6 offensive linemen in Nick Caley's offense. So, 2nd-round pick for a guy who's not a starter, I wouldn't say that's necessarily a hit. Ladarius Henderson was a 7th-round pick, so, however much stock you want to take in that. Juice Scruggs was a 2nd-round pick. He's a backup, so I would say another pick in the 2nd round in the early rounds for offensive line that did not work out for the Texans. Jarrett Patterson, round 6 guy as a backup, so about where you would want a guy in the 6th round to produce as a decent backup option. I think that's an okay pick. And then adding the bonus and the cherry on top, and the reason why a lot of Texans fans, a lot of people have trust issues with Nick Caserio in drafting offensive linemen. Right here. Kenyon Green, they took in round 1 to be, their mauler in the middle, and that didn't work out at all. They ended up trading him away to the Philadelphia Eagles. Was a draft bust for this Texans team. Now, Caserio could find himself on the hot seat this offseason if he can't find offensive line talent in the draft. He did so with Ursary, but as you saw in that list, not a lot of other guys have panned out for the Houston Texans in terms of guys drafted to play the offensive line position. He needs to get at least one starter on the offensive line in the draft. At least that is bare minimum for Nick Caserio in this year's NFL draft. And if we're being honest, he probably needs to draft 2 in this year's draft. So it's a big offseason for Nick Caserio, and a lot of the NFL are already doubting him. I mean, just like C.J. Stroud, a lot of people are doubting whether or not he's the Texans' starting quarterback. So big off seasons and a big prove-it year for C.J. Stroud, for Nick Caserio, and also for the Texans' offensive coordinator, Nick Caley. Now, coming up in just a moment, ESPN had another article breaking down all the QB options and all the QB-needy teams around the National Football League. Is Davis Mills a top option for other teams? Well, I'll tell you about that here in just a moment, but couldn't do today's show if it wasn't for our amazing sponsor in PrizePicks. Now, the big game is over, so no more football action for a little bit, but on PrizePicks, you can shoot your shot and get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. That's right. PrizePicks is now giving you $50 in lineups when you sign up and play your first $5. PrizePicks makes every dunk, every dime, every board, every home run, every game-saving catch that much more exciting. So don't miss this chance to get started on America's #1 app for sports picks. It's super simple to play. Just pick more or less on at least two to six players' stat projections. If you get your picks right, you can cash in. You can pick from all your favorite sports: basketball, baseball, hockey, MMA, soccer, college basketball, tennis, golf, esports. They got it all. Now, I have this lineup. One of my favorite things on PrizePicks, they actually have season-long projections, and I went with this one for baseball, and you might see a theme here. I'll just be honest, every guy on this projection right here is or was an Astro. So this is my baseball season-long projections. I'm going Alex Bregman, more on his home runs. Breggy, I believe, signed with the Chicago Cubs. Also, we got 2 Astros, Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez. I'm going the more on their home runs. And then Kyle Tucker, I'm going less. You might be, Jeremy, why less on Kyle Tucker? Well, F him. That's why. He's signing with the evil empire over there in L.A. So I will be rooting on his downfall for sure this entire year. And so can you with our friends over at PrizePicks. Join the millions of users and sign up today for America's #1 sports picks app. They put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. PrizePicks accepts most major payment methods, making deposits into your account quick and easy this sports season. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it is good to be right. All right, let's break down this ESPN quarterback article. They broke down the top QB options for all the top QB needy teams this offseason, and let's see where Davis Mills stacks up. Now, they had the top 4 options listed as this. They had Kyler Murray, currently the quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. They would obviously, a team wanting him would have to trade for him. Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback right now for the Miami Dolphins, same boat there. A team would have to trade for him. Malik Willis, many see him as the top free agent option at quarterback if a team is wanting to do so. Formerly the backup for Jordan Love there for the Green Bay Packers. And then Kirk Cousins, I put free agency question mark because there's a lot of reports out there that the Falcons are going to end up cutting Kirk Cousins. But until they do so, a team could possibly trade for him. Now, I don't know who would exactly want to trade for Kirk Cousins or give up draft capital for Cousins, but another option that ESPN listed. And then they went down the list of a bunch of other options for teams looking for quarterbacks. And honestly, out of the first 4, and even this list, I think Davis Mills might be the most enticing option. You have Davis Mills, who you would need to trade for, Will Levis in a trade, Jalen Milroe, in a trade. Tanner McKee, backup for the Eagles. I think he's another decent option. You'd have to trade for him. Anthony Richardson, Spencer Rattler, both of those guys you would have to trade for. Derek Carr, I just put retired, and so did ESPN, because I don't know the situation down there in New Orleans, if they're willing to, just cut him and let him pick a team, if they're still looking for draft capital for DC. But that was another option they mentioned. And then the 2026 NFL draft was another one, because behind Fernando Mendoza, there's not really another great quarterback option. They mentioned Garrett Nussmeier. They mentioned Carson Beck and a couple other guys, but I don't know if that really is an inspiring option for a lot of teams going into this offseason. Now, that begs the question, is Davis Mills one of the top quarterback options for other teams this offseason? 57.2 completion percentage, 915 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception while he was playing for your Houston Texans this year. And he played well. He kind of kickstarted that winning streak for the Houston Texans that ended up getting them into the playoffs. They started out 0-3, and a lot of people point to Davis Mills, especially that win over the Jacksonville Jaguars, as the catalyst for what really turned around the Texans season. So, for other teams, is he really the best quarterback option? He's shown he can manage games, is on a very team-friendly contract, and I think when you're balancing risk and reward, if you're looking at other teams, I think, Kyler Murray, major risk, a lot of, character concerns, questions around his love for the game and his ability to be a good teammate. Tua Tagovailoa, major health concerns there. It seems like every time you turn your head around, he's getting another concussion. Malik Willis is a massive question mark. He really reminds me of guys like a Matt Flynn, somebody who played good in 2 to 3 games, but the sample size is so small. Do we really know what you're going to get in Malik Willis as a free agent? How much are you willing to pay a guy like that? And Kirk Cousins, as he's inching closer to 40, does he still have something left in the tank? He played well for the Falcons down the stretch, but I do think Davis Mills could be a better option for a lot of these teams. This is what ESPN had to say about Mills. It's hard to see the Texans trading Mills, whom they just gave a 1-year, $7 million contract extension to, continuing to provide effective QB2 play behind C.J. Stroud. But perhaps a strong offer could entice them to deal Mills, who is far from an exciting option at 28 years old, but is clearly somewhere between the quarterback 2 and quarterback 1 worlds for quarterback quality. Note that his old offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowik, now the Dolphins' offensive coordinator, Miami would need a new quarterback if it were to trade Tua Tagovailoa. And I agree, that could be an enticing option. Here were all the teams that they listed who would probably need a quarterback this offseason. The Atlanta Falcons have Michael Penix Jr. Is he the guy there? They could be looking for another option. The Indianapolis Colts, I don't think Daniel Jones will be ready week 1, so they'll probably need an option to start for them. I don't think the Texans would trade in division, though. The New York Jets, they were hoping that Dante Moore would come out. He goes back to Oregon. What are they going to do at quarterback? The Pittsburgh Steelers probably going to go with Aaron Rodgers. The Cleveland Browns probably going to go with Shedeur Sanders, but you never know. The Dolphins are actively trying to trade their quarterback. Same with the Arizona Cardinals. The Minnesota Vikings, they are kind of stuck in the middle on what to do with J.J. McCarthy. The Rams, they don't know how much left in the tank Matthew Stafford has in the Kansas City Chiefs. They have Patrick Mahomes, but suffered an injury at the end of the season. So will he be ready week 1? They might be looking for another quarterback option. At the end of the day, I don't think the Texans trade Mills. I've already done multiple shows on Mills and the trade rumors around the Texans quarterback too. And I'll continue to say, unless they get a crazy trade offer that they can't refuse, Mills is going to stay as the quarterback 2 for your Houston Texans. Because if you're a team with aspirations, and the Texans are, to get into the playoffs and to make a playoff run, we've seen it before, we've seen it again this year. Jarrett Stidham, right? Teams need good backup quarterbacks, and that's exactly what Davis Mills is. He's a fringe starter, but a really good backup in the NFL, especially for teams that are looking to get over the hump, just like your Houston Texans. So unless a team is willing to probably dole out a second-round pick, I don't foresee Mills going anywhere. I really don't. And I don't think a team would be willing to give up a second-round pick for Davis Mills. Now, the Panthers gave up a second-round pick for Sam Darnold before, and he was not good with the New York Jets. Obviously, good now with the Seattle Seahawks, just won the Super Bowl. But for a guy like Davis Mills, he might be one of the top options for a lot of teams looking for quarterbacks this offseason. Because, as I mentioned, the other guys on this article, a lot more risky, and then just not as good as Mills. Like, I think he's the best quarterback on this screen right here. Really. He's better than Levis, better than Milroe, better than McKee, better than Richardson, better than Rattler. Derek Carr is a massive question mark, but I would say probably better than Derek Carr. Just will a team be willing to break the bank for him, give a ton of draft capital to the Texans? Or will the Texans look to keep their quarterback too this offseason? I lean towards them keeping Davis Mills because, like I said, they're trying to go on a playoff run, and I think Mills helps you do just that. That's all I have for you on today's show, folks. If you want to hit me up on social media, you can do so on X, on IG, and on TikTok. My DMs are always open, so hit me up and give me a follow on all these platforms.